Retirement is coming, but are millennials ready?
Now with inflation and everything's going up, it's so much harder to prepare for retirement because a lot of people are cracking into their savings.
I see people still working at the age of 70, 80, and it's so difficult to watch that.
Like financially, I don't think retirement is going to look the same as it has. And we're already seeing that retirement is already looking different.
The last few years have been a rough go for Canadians. Pandemic, inflation, and skyrocketing housing prices. Retirement may seem further away than ever for many.
Most Canadians, janitor and vice president alike, must retire, usually at 65, regardless of their own wishes, health, or finances.
But what does the long-term outlook hold for a generation just coming into its own?
Have you thought at all about your retirement?
No, I'm not going to lie to you.
There's definitely more chance that I'm going to retire later than earlier.
I think that a lot of people believe reasonably that they can no longer retire.
The economic problem is a very tangible problem for many older people.
We are working and we are trying to pay our bills and we're getting really close, but we're just falling shy of the target.
I spoke to a few experts about retirement in Canada because I wanted to know, how might retirement look different for millennials?
A man ought to prepare himself for retirement when he reaches 50. I don't mean he should retire then, but he ought to be getting ready.
I think it's fair to say that every generation has its own unique challenges. And so trying to compare across them can be really, really tough to do.
That's Tammy Sherrill. She's an economics professor researching retirement at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario.
If you were to try to compare millennials today to, say, their great-grandparents, there's huge differences in the backgrounds, their work histories, especially for women, and then also just the public policies that we have in place. They've changed a lot over the decades. I like to think that those challenges are simply different, not necessarily greater or lesser than the generation before.
She doesn't think millennials are worse off than previous generations. Like their parents, they'll have access to the Canadian pension plan. But thanks to recent investments, the returns will actually be higher.
For anyone who's retiring when the system is finally fully implemented, which is still about 40 years away, you should expect a much bigger pension.
More money sounds great when you stop working, but millennials are also likely to live a lot longer than their parents.
I would expect that the millennials' retirement will be different than it was for their grandparents. For one, they're going to be healthier and living longer than their parents ever imagined. I also do a lot of research thinking about longevity and lifespan and how well off people are as they move in terms of health into their retirement. And that's increasing year after year after year. And so you should expect the average millennial is going to come into retirement healthier than their parents did. They should plan for a longer lifespan than their parents might have.
So while millennials will generally get more out of the CPP, they'll also live a lot longer and need money to last. And just the CPP alone won't be enough to maintain the lifestyle they're accustomed to. That's going to create challenges for considering just when to retire.
I'm a millennial myself, and I feel like we were the first generation, I'm an elder millennial, that was like having to throw the rule book out a little bit.
Shannon Lee Simmons is a certified financial planner and author who has written a few books on managing money.
I think the idea is that making retirement work is a combination of having savings, having inflation-protected guaranteed income, which is like CPP, old age security, any pension income you have, or even rental income, plus costing as little as you possibly can.
She thinks the formula previous generations used to retire may not make as much sense for millennials.
A booklet of instructions and a form to fill out. All we need, they say, is proof of your birth date. Your family Bible will do.
For multiple, hundreds and hundreds of years, the idea of stopping working and chilling out is totally foreign and wild. And then only in the last, 60 to 70 years have we even fathomed this idea that you could earn enough money, put enough away that you could just kick back and not work for 40 years. If you retire at 60 and live to 100, that's 40 years that you are not earning money, but expecting to be able to pay bills. That's a lot. That's a wild expectation that we have.
Simmons believes a lot of millennials will continue to work past that traditional retirement age, entering a kind of semi-retirement until actual old age. But something that's changed since their parents' time is the job market. It's becoming less common for a person to work one job for their entire working life.
Does the job market out there give millennials and younger Canadians an opportunity to save and plan for retirement like their parents did?
The short answer is no, I think. I think that the job market is more volatile. Pension funds are not exactly the way they use. The plans are not there. So you really have to really rely on yourself in order to provide this kind of pension. So I think that no, it will be very different. And I think that people will have to be much more creative in order to finance their future. It also means that people will be working longer. I think it will be a norm to see people working until their 70s, mid-70s, because they simply cannot afford retiring. So the labor force will get older and older.
We don't necessarily have lifelong jobs anymore. You don't graduate and go work for a company and stay there till you retire. There's a lot less predictability about it. There's a lot less stability. So that moving around has also made things tough for people.
They say a lot about like the rise of the gig economy recently, so I think we'll see like people continuing maybe a few more side hustles into retirement.
There are also a lot less pensions offered by employers, plans where employers would match contributions from employees. While public sector and unionized jobs might still enjoy that, it's becoming less and less common in the private sector.
It used to be very simple. Most people, not all of them, most people worked for an employer, and at this point that we called retirement, they would transition from a paycheck to a pension. And that's it. There are no decisions that have to be made. You work, you retire, they'll give you 70 to 80% of your paycheck, and you're done, and that replaces what your paycheck was. There's no complexity there.
I'm not going to be spending the next 35 years of my life, believing that this thing is going to be coming for me.
I don't want to be working myself to death when I'm in my old age.
We don't have the capacity to do savings or investments or require wealth in the way that people have in the past, just with costs of living, just with how everything else is.
Now let's think about what it looks like today. You have a money purchase account or a defined contribution account if you're lucky. You got to figure out what to do with it at retirement. Do you roll it over into an RRSP? Do you roll it over into a RIF? At what age do you roll it over into a RIF? How do you satisfy RMD, which is the fact that or RIF requirements that every single person has to take out the money at some point?
He says retirement is changing, including how to consider what that actually means. For most of your working life, you work on accumulation, making more money. But at that retirement age, you're actually working on decumulation, how you're going to spend that hard-earned cash. But with tons of financial products on the market, RPPs, RRSPs, TFSAs, it's become increasingly complex, which brings up another increasingly important factor, financial literacy.
Is we've got a much greater variety of options than existed for prior generations. So if anything, what concerns me is the financial literacy needs are arguably greater than what they were historically.
Colin Busby researches Canadian retirement trends. He says a slightly greater percentage of millennials' wealth is being tied up in home ownership, which means this generation has higher debt.
As they enter the housing market by taking on larger mortgages than prior generations, those kind of things could end up posing financial problems should mortgages persist later in life. Now, there's another wrinkle to that too, in the sense that housing assets are notoriously difficult to convert to a form of retirement income, in the sense that if you want to downsize, if you want to sort of convert that wealth to an income stream, it's not easy. It comes with really, really, really hard trade-offs, like how much further do I want to move away from where I currently live? How much smaller of a space am I willing to live in, right?
He says deciding to liquidate your house to tap into that income may not solve all the financial pressure in retirement. Millennials have to consider whether moving means they'll be further away from their family doctor or hospital, crucial locations when you're up in age. Plus, he says you need to consider how much of that money will be used in choosing a place to live.
It really depends in part too on the future of rents. If rents are, going to continue to increase as well, your options in terms of transforming that housing wealth into another form of income could potentially get eaten up on the other end.
I asked him the big question at the heart of this video.
Do you think that millennials are worse off than their parents or previous generations when it comes to considering their retirement planning?
It's probably too early to say, and that's the unfortunate answer. When we look at overall wealth and asset values of millennials compared to previous generations, they seem to be doing just fine. There's statistics, Canada research that shows that as a group, they seem to be doing quite well. Now, however, within that group, you do see quite a significant amount of disparity.
The richest 1% control more than half the world's wealth.
When you tell a Canadian, the bottom 50% of income earners in this country only own 6% of the wealth, people just can't believe it. They can't absorb it.
Ignoring the averages, which show that things are reasonably okay for millennials compared to previous generations. And when you drill down amongst millennial generations, sort of that within generation cohort, there are some pretty significant gaps across the income and wealth distribution scale that I think we have to have an eye on, and we have to be concerned about people getting left behind. And that's an issue to keep an eye on as well.
As with all predictions, it's hard to look into the crystal ball and figure out when millennials will be able to cash out. But one thing is clear, it won't be the same as their parents.
From a young age, my parents instilled into me that it was very important to start saving as early as possible so that my investments could build interest and I'd be better off in the long run.
Like, have you already started saving for retirement?
No, I think when I'm done school, I'm gonna start.
Yeah, I thought about my retirement, especially like we don't know if the government's gonna give us like a retirement plan in the future because we are uncertain about the economic situation.
A confluence of a housing crunch, starkly different job market, more finance options, and life longevity. You won't be able to just walk into retirement like some older generations. It may require more planning and understanding of what it takes to meet that goal. But that doesn't mean it's out of reach.
So it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $1,000 a month, the actual habit of taking some of your paycheck and putting it into something where you're not going to touch until you're one day, quote, retired, is actually so sacred and important to keep going, even in those lean times. So keep that habit going no matter what, and reduce the amount that's going there even if you have to, which is totally okay, but just don't stop altogether, don't give up.
Growing old is a normal, lifelong process. It starts at conception and leads to death. It's inevitable.
Also make sure to check the description below for our sources and more useful links on the topic.